Welcome back to Whiskey Politics. Dave Sussman here, your host and purveyor at Whiskey Politics. You can find me at davesussman.com. And I am delighted to actually continue a discussion we started last night on the radio, on Real Side Radio, to have Buzz Patterson join us to our long-form discussion today. Buzz Patterson, you know the name. He is a Republican candidate for California's 7th Congressional District, just to the east of Sacramento, I believe. He is a U.S. Air Force pilot, lieutenant colonel, and commander, and White House aide and former carrier of the nuclear football under President Bill Clinton. But we're not going to hold that against him because he is also the bestseller of some amazing books, including The Dereliction of Duty, which, Colonel Patterson, he revealed the amazing and cavalier disregard in which Bill Clinton treated our nation's most sensitive military secrets. Welcome, Buzz. How are you? Long time no talk and see.
Hey, Dave. How are you doing? Great to be with you.
Good to have you with us as well. So first of all, for folks that don't know you, tell us a little bit about you worked with, and it's funny, I was thinking about this actually, you worked with Bill Clinton. We had another senior military advisor to another president. His name was Colonel Stephen Chilander, who was responsible for the president's emergency satchel, otherwise known as the nuclear football. He had a really interesting relationship with President Reagan, and we spent an hour talking about it. He hung out with him at the ranch, and he went to the Berlin Wall for Mr. Gorbachev to out on this wall speech and the whole thing. What was your relationship like with Bill Clinton?
Yeah, so Don Chilander was Reagan's military aide, Air Force military aide, and carried the nuclear football. My relationship with President Bill Clinton was nothing like his relationship with Reagan. I wish I had worked for Reagan, quite honestly. But so I had the same position as Chilander, did the exact same things, stayed in the same bedroom in the White House that he was in 40 years ago. But yeah, Clinton and I, we did a lot of things together. I was by his side 24/7 for 2 years. In the White House, anytime he would leave the White House to either go jog or play golf or do an official function or go on a trip on Air Force One, one of the military aides is with him by his side 24/7. And I was the Air Force guy. There's actually five military aides, one from each of the services, and we rotate responsibilities in being with the president. And it's a full-time job because you're not only responsible, Dave, for the nuclear football, but you're also responsible for making sure all the military assets assigned to the White House. So Air Force One, Marine One, the White House Communications Agency, the White House Transportation Agency, which is all the Army drivers and for the motorcades, the White House Mess, which is all the Navy chefs and cooks. So it's a huge umbrella of responsibilities. The most visible one, however, as you pointed out, is carrying the large black satchel that accompanies the president no matter where he goes, 24 hours a day, anywhere in the world.
You know, you were there from, what was it, 96 to 98?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, those were some pretty pivotal years. We had Bosnia-Herzegovina. We had, obviously, some situations with Iraq that was brewing. What was it like behind the scenes there? I know you've written some books about it, and you've been very, very critical about President Clinton's treatment of the military. But what was the feeling amongst yourself and your colleagues that were also aides working for President Bill Clinton while wearing the uniform?
It was a very difficult environment to be a military officer in, I have to tell you. And I first arrived there, I was very privileged and honored to be a young Air Force major and had been asked by the White House to serve at the president's side, work for the commander-in-chief directly. But I realized very early on that it was a very chaotic environment. I got there just prior to the 1996 campaign kicking off, and I left the White House just prior to the Monica Lewinsky impeachment in 1998. So I was there during all that time. And you're right, there was so much going on. Every single day was a different day. Every single day was a new challenge, Dave. And I think that I was very close with the Secret Service guys and girls, and we kind of bonded together and would share a lot of the same stories about what we were seeing. Of course, we were there to support the president and serve the office of the presidency, not necessarily the human being that was Bill Clinton. So there were some difficult moments, though, especially going through the Monica Lewinsky situation and also up into the impeachment months.
What sense did you get that was going on there with Lewinsky? Because this was just a nuclear bomb, I'm sure, in the West Wing.
When I first arrived there, it was May of 1996, and I noticed that there was a female intern who actually was working not in the White House complex per se, but in the old executive office building, which is next door. They call it the 18 acres and the White House complex. But the White House itself, I noticed there was a young female intern that had the same Oval Office access that I had as a senior staffer. So I asked a couple of Secret Service guys what was going on, and they said, well, there's kind of a special relationship there. You probably don't want to dig into that too deeply. And then, so I knew what was happening. And then about a year and a half later, I was actually the first person on the Clinton schedule the morning that the Lewinsky campaign or fair actually hit the press. In fact, I was going into the President Clinton's, the Oval Office at 7 o'clock that morning and saw the Washington Post headlines, sex scandal rocks the White House. And I knew it was going to be a very difficult day in the White House. I went into the Oval Office and President Clinton was behind his desk. He'd been up all night long, and you could tell that he knew he had been caught. And that was the beginning of the end. That was when, quite frankly, Hillary became the co-president of the United States. Hillary agreed to stay with Bill, and Bill agreed to stay with Hillary. And she started calling a lot of the shots. That was January of 1998. And she didn't leave him because he promised to help her campaign going forward as senator from New York.
Yeah, that was 2000, and she won. There was, I take a look, obviously we can make comparisons to what we just saw with the Trump impeachment, but this was such a different kind of animal because it really did come out from something that was nefarious. And, we take a look at Bill Clinton. He was ultimately impeached by the House, but acquitted by the Senate, similar to Trump. But Bill Clinton actually broke laws that were actually broken, unlike President Trump, who this was a purely partisan political sham. At the time there, was there, I suppose you may have not heard all the conversations, but what you did overhear, was there some serious concern that this was it, that this was the end of the presidency of Bill Clinton?
Yeah, and it all happened very quickly, Dave. I'll give you the kind of the chronology. So in early January of 1998, President Clinton was testifying under oath in the Paula Jones situation. And that's where the Monica Lewinsky thing was asked by the prosecution or the defense team for Paula Jones. And Monica Lewinsky's name was surfaced, and we all knew it was just a matter of time till that dam broke. And the dam broke, and a couple of weeks later, President Clinton was under the gun, and he actually committed 3 felonies. Total perjury was probably the biggest and the most dramatic, and also obstruction of justice. So he actually broke the law and was impeached on a bipartisan basis in the House back in 1998. It wasn't anything like we just saw with President Trump, where every single person stuck to party lines. Back in 1998, there were several Democrats that crossed and voted for impeachment as well in the House. So, and it became a very dark place to work, Dave. I'll be honest with you. I mean, a lot of the senior staffers and people very loyal to President Clinton realized that they had put this faith and this belief in this man, and he had lied to them for years and years and years. He had lied to them. And it was just a really difficult place to work for several months. And of course, we all know that initially he lied about it. He had to testify then under to Ken Starr's office. He lied to them,
independent counsel,
which started the beginning of the end really for him and his power. He became kind of a neutered president from that point on.
Yeah, he certainly did. When you take a look at the comparisons, because obviously we just went through this psychodrama with, Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff and Gerald Nadler, they're basically saying the exact opposite of what they were saying 20 years ago during the impeachment, and that they wouldn't want a politically biased impeachment. And what did you take away from that with your inside knowledge of the Clinton administration's impeachment?
Well, it was obvious being in the White House back in those days and hearing people like Nadler and Pelosi and Schumer come out in defense of President Clinton and saying this is a partisan witch hunt, and using all the same language basically, and they flipped on that 180 degrees with President Trump. And I think it just shows you, in my opinion, which is one of the reasons why I started writing books about politics and the military, which is one of the reasons why I'm running for Congress, is that Democrats will literally do or say anything necessary to retain power, to gain power, and to not lose influence. And I think that they realize that that Clinton was in trouble, and they rallied the wagons. And I think that they did the exact opposite for President Clinton, purely partisan endeavor. And can you imagine, Dave, if we had saved all that money from the Mueller investigation and from the impeachment and actually put those dollars toward real problems in America, real issues like the homeless situation in California? I mean, it's just a complete waste of time, energy, and money.
And that's why you're running. And I want to talk about that further into the interview. And everybody can find your campaign at buzz4congress.com and at Buzz Patterson on Twitter. We're going to have the links below this interview here. We're going to get very heavily into all of that and what's going on in California and such. But I'm a student of history, and, I think the presidency and the White House going all the way back to the very beginning, the founding fathers, is just fascinating to me, and I just can't get enough of it. So when I've got a lens into history, and I was old enough to, know what was going on. I was in my, how old was I? I was barely 30, when the impeachment was happening. That makes me old. But
I'm older.
older anyway. I was studying it so carefully, and, you came out and you wrote some very critical books. I mean, Dereliction of Duty is really a very hard look at the Clinton administration and how you say that they, in essence, had a cavalier disregard for our nation's most sensitive military secrets and the lives of the men and women. I'm going from your book here, in uniform, and the integrity of the office of the president. Two questions, and I want to get into that a little bit. First, was there a reaction, and are you concerned at all, or were you concerned at all about being suicided?
Well, to get back so when I left the White House in '98, I went to the Air Force Academy, was a commander at the Academy until I retired in 2001. And I had no inclination to write any books, but I had several people I worked with at the White House, fellow military officers, that encouraged me to write the book. I'd never written anything, so I decided to write Dereliction of Duty. It became a New York Times bestseller. Came out in 2003. New York Times bestseller. In fact, it still sells very well 16, 17 years later. But when it first came out, I was not prepared for the media blitz that was going to happen around me. I mean, Sean Hannity had me on, Rush Limbaugh had me on, Bill O'Reilly. And the Clintons came out after me in the press pretty aggressively. In fact, at one point, Dave, Mrs. Clinton tried to, as a senator from New York, she tried to have my Air Force military pension rescinded. And then they realized that they were just calling more attention to the book. And I was number 2 or number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list for 6 months. And they realized they were just fueling the fire of people who wanted to read about their problems and their issues. And the book's not a kiss and tell book. It's actually just a very objective look from an Air Force officer, from a military officer, of what we as Americans should expect from our commander-in-chief. I don't talk a lot about, in fact, I think I'd mentioned Monica Lewinsky one time in the entire book, for example. So it did very well. Initially, when the book came out, I was living in the Atlanta, Georgia suburbs. And on my cul-de-sac, I had a lot of former Marines, and they liked the book too. They told me not to worry about my safety; they'd take care of me, and they did. And here we are, 17 years later, and I think I've gotten enough notoriety now, in running for office now, that the Clintons have not gone after me, but they've gone after a lot of other people, but not me, and I feel very blessed for that.
So the issues that you raise, because, we have to go back, and again, we're now looking back through the lens of 22, 23, 24 years ago. It's almost a quarter of a century ago.
Right.
A lot of people suggest that Bill Clinton, he let bin Laden go, right? Mm-hmm. At more than a lot of people, almost everybody, that's from a historic standpoint. He made some decisions that in some way led to 9/11. And obviously he didn't intend for that to happen. But you refer to, him treating our nation's military secrets in a cavalier way. Specifically, what were some of the policy decisions that he was doing that was endangering the country?
Well, there are probably 3 main things I could pass on from my time and my personal experiences, Dave. So we had 8 to 10 chances in my time, my 2 years there, to either capture or kill bin Laden. 8 to 10. And I think I personally lay what happened on 9/11 at the feet of President Clinton, because every single time President Clinton chose not to take action. So there was one situation I talk about in dereliction where we had CIA and special operations team on the ground in Afghanistan. We had bin Laden lined up. We could either capture or kill him, and President Clinton chose not to do that. So that's dereliction of duty, which is why I named the book that. Secondly, talking about protection of national secrets, President Clinton, during my time there, lost the nuclear codes. So the way that the football works is that the football is carried by the military aide. It's a large black satchel. It has everything that the military or the president needs to launch nuclear weapons or retaliate with nuclear weapons. But the president, every president since John F. Kennedy, with the advent of nuclear weapons, has carried a little credit card-sized document, which are in fact the nuclear codes. That's how the president identifies himself, authenticates himself to the Pentagon as being the guy or girl that can actually launch nuclear codes. Well, President Clinton lost those codes. And I talk about this in dereliction also. When I first pressed him about how long it had, well, we looked through the White House, we turned it upside down, we never did find them. And I asked him how long it had been since he had last seen them, and Dave, he couldn't remember. I said, has it been days? I said, has it been weeks? He goes, it's been months. He just couldn't remember. So here's the President of the United States, Dave, with probably the most important military top secret document in the history of mankind, and President Clinton loses those codes, and A, doesn't tell anybody, and B, can't remember how long it's been. And those kind of things, again, the book is objective, and it's about my experiences. And again, Dave, it's when we go to the polls in November of 2020, we're going to be voting for a commander-in-chief. Yeah. It's what you and I and everybody else as a citizen of this country should expect from a commander-in-chief. And President Clinton had none of those attributes. He failed. He was derelict in his duties across the board. It wasn't just a onesie-twosie kind of thing, Dave. He didn't understand the military. He didn't like the military. Hillary Clinton loathed the military. And it was just one of those things where there was a complete disconnect in his approach as a commander-in-chief and what the military really needed and was asking for. And he didn't deliver.
That's a fascinating story. Did anybody at the Smithsonian look in the blue dress to see if the codes were in there?
Yeah, well, what was the sad part of that situation is that he asked me not to tell anybody that he had lost the codes. I had to go up to my office and call the Pentagon, and because the codes had never been lost, there was no process to recreate the codes in a very quick manner. And I'm talking about the codes. So the president has the codes, the same codes that the Pentagon has. It's the same codes that every nuclear submarine or nuclear bomber or missile silo in the country has. So they had to swap out and recreate all of that logistical structure to protect our nuclear weapons. And again, all he cared about was I not tell anybody, and I promised him that I wouldn't. Until I got out of the Air Force and wrote dereliction, and of course it's all in there because people need to know what actually happened.
What was said between you and the other officers? You guys were talking about this in the break room, obviously. What did you guys say to each other?
They were incredulous, number one, that it had happened. So when I called the Pentagon, the Pentagon folks in a very top secret capacity came over to there's a briefing room in the bunker in the White House. So we had a classified meeting to go over, how this had happened and what we should do from there. The guys in the Pentagon really got busy, and they recreated some codes or created new codes very, very quickly. But again, there was no process, and it just goes to the heart of the matter, Dave, is the fact that the guy just didn't care. I mean, he was more concerned about that kind of thing getting into the media and affecting his legacy than he was about actual national security, and that was again very troubling for me as a military officer, and prompted me later on, when I got out of the Air Force, can actually talk about this kind of stuff as a private citizen, led me to write Dereliction of Duty. And there's so much more, though, in that book. It's not just the codes, or it's not just bin Laden. There's so much more in terms of his disdain for the military that really, for me, I was kind of writing it as a clarion call to the country to not do that again, not to elect a guy like that again, and we did with Barack Obama.
Yeah.
So apparently we haven't learned our lessons.
Which you wrote some books about as well, Conduct Unbecoming, specifically how Barack Obama is destroying the military and endangering our security. Yeah, so they repeated that, and you got another president in who basically just gutted the military, as President Trump is talking about. And
Right.
you've got President Trump back in office now as a Republican. He seems to be strengthening the military. Let me ask you, have you always... I assume your politics that you're running as a Republican, so you have been conservative. Were you always conservative, especially the lead up to working with Bill Clinton?
I was raised in a conservative military family, and as a military family, you're taught active duty, not to voice your political beliefs, philosophies. And prior to the White House calling me to ask me to interview for the position, I was politically apathetic. I thought President Reagan was a great president. And then I didn't vote for President H.W. Bush. I hadn't voted for anybody, really, until, in fact, I didn't vote for Clinton. And they hired me anyway. But my experience in the Clinton White House drove me, I was conservative by nature, but it drove me way further to the right. And I saw so many things that I just didn't agree with. And didn't in the Clinton White House. I mean, there was no strategy, there was no vision. It was all about protecting him from scandals and those kind of things. So, it made me a much more committed conservative for sure.
And we saw, obviously, Barack Obama come in, and again, you've written a book on it. What were some of the most egregious things that you saw regarding Barack Obama and the military?
Well, my book, Conduct Unbecoming, I compare Clinton to Obama. Thinking that Obama was going to come out better in the end than Clinton had his performance. And what really upset me about Obama was a huge drawdown in military capability, B, him going around the world essentially and bowing to and acquiescing to our enemies. And that's not fighting from a position of strength. That's fighting from behind, leading from behind. And Obama did a lot of things that damaged the military too. Most importantly, drawing us down, taking a lot of folks out of the military, not enhancing or upgrading equipment that we need. And so thank God we have President Trump, because I really believe, Dave, if we had 8 years of Hillary Clinton on top of 8 years of Barack Obama, our military would never have been the same. But Trump's pulling us back up again. We're kicking ass and taking names again, and it's the kind of leadership we need.
Yeah, absolutely. I take a look at it, and it deeply concerns me how close we came to the precipice on so many different things during Barack Obama's term, during Bill Clinton's term. The whole idea of the JV squad, being, and I'm not talking about AOC plus 3, I'm talking about ISIS and how that, by withdrawing the troops in a very callous way, essentially was very irresponsible, essentially led to the caliphate. And what do you think it is? Because you are running to essentially win a very flippable seat in California's 7th Congressional District. And I think the Democrat is that district is 2+2? It's
a +3. +3? It used to be solidly red, Dave, until 2012, and they gerrymandered the district, and then it's been Ami Bera. Dr. Ami Bera has been the incumbent, but he's done nothing. So it's a very winnable, it's a very diverse district. It's a very big district. And we have everything from a tech corridor to ranchers and farmers to, just a little bit of everything, actually. If you go north, we have a huge Russian population, actually, in that district.
Really?
A big Slavic community, and a huge Afghani community is in that district. So there's a little bit of everything.
Interesting.
It's going to be it's a
so
really
so when they take a look at a President Trump who's basically reversed everything that Obama did, from regulations to the military to squashing ISIS and doing these things, of how they feel about what this president is doing specifically for the military. Well,
to almost to a person that I talked to in the district, people are really happy with President Trump's performance. There's some people who have a little bit of a difficulty with his style. I particularly don't have that problem with him, but some people do. But they all love his results. And one of the big things in District 7 that it's a huge military population. There used to be 2 Air Force bases in Sacramento that were closed under Clinton, ironically. So a lot of military retirees there, a lot of people who are dependent on the VA hospital just there at Mather. But also in that district, the unemployment rate is 13.8%. That's 4 times the national average right now. So something's not getting done in that district. What's happening in California, as you can probably attest, is that with our tax base, a lot of people are leaving. In fact, in California, we had more people leave this year than came in for the first time in our history. A lot of those people are small business owners. So we've got to figure out how to protect lower taxes for small business and get people hired. And Barra's not doing that. So people are getting quite honestly, are getting tired of them. I had a young man who called me a couple of days ago who was an intern and worked for Barra in his office for a couple of years. And he said, I'm just sick of the guy. He never came to the office. He never showed up. The office was chaos. And he's not done anything for us. So he just voted for me as a Democrat. So there's a lot of that kind of thing going on. People like Trump in District 7. Hillary beat him by about 7% in 2016. I think that's probably going to be, I don't think that Hillary's not going to run, number one. I don't think it'll be Elizabeth Warren. So I think we're going to be able to get a lot of the non-party preference, and independent voters are going to come over to our side. But people like Trump's his results and his policies. Again, there's some people who have a hard time with his personality. Yeah. But they love what the guy's doing.
I got to ask you, because you're running in California, it's a split district. You're next to Sacramento, for crying out loud. I mean, that's talk about the belly of the beast in California. Yeah. And just a real quick, recap for you. I came to California as a kid. I was 8 years old in 1977. My father moved us here from a very socialist London, England. And I remember strikes every week. I remember a tax base of 65 to 85%. My family went everywhere. They went to Australia. They went to Switzerland. We came to the United States. And we came to the best place on earth. We came to the best business climate. We came to the best schools. We came to, obviously, the weather and the mountains and everything else hasn't changed. But it seems like everything man has touched over the past 40 years. You talk about Jerry Brown. There's been other governors as well. But the Brown family certainly owned it. It seems like everything man has touched has been an absolute disaster. But you are still in a very blue state. How, as a conservative, as a Republican, do you campaign without being a firebrand, MAGA hat-wearing guy in California?
You appeal to people who can cross. For example, in Sacramento, one of our biggest issues is homelessness. That affects everybody, no matter if you are a Democrat, Republican, Green Party, Independent. If you're a small business owner, that affects you. Homelessness in Sacramento, LA, and San Francisco has gone pretty much non-tended to. And I've talked to Democrats, and they want to fix the homeless problem in California 7. You talk about water. Water in Sacramento is a huge deal. Water rights, and that bridges party lines, right? You're not talking, if you're talking to ranchers and farmers and business owners. They don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. They want control of where the water comes from and how much they have to pay for the water. There's those kinds of things. And I also think you can appeal, Dave, is the fact that, this once, as you just pointed out, this once great Golden State in the 60s and 70s, people were flocking here, right? Yeah. And it was, the Hollywood and the mountains and Tahoe and the beaches. People are flocking out of here. So whether or not if you're a Republican, Democrat, you're seeing, we have the same problems. High taxes, high crime, homelessness, water issues, droughts. I mean, it's all the same. So regardless of party affiliation, there's pretty much a mutual coming together there. So I don't think it really matters in terms of the R or the D. I think people in California are fed up and they want change. I mean, they really do want change. In fact, I don't know if you've seen my latest campaign commercial, but I talk about it. I talk about California, and it's basically the fact is we have two decisions here, two options. We can leave, which people are doing. A lot of people are going to Texas, Idaho, Nevada, Colorado, or we can stay and fight. And I'm choosing to stay and fight. And I think I'm going to fight for Democrats, Independents, Green Party people just as hard as I'm going to fight for Republicans. So that's my message. And again, I'm also an outsider. I'm a fresh air kind of guy. I didn't come into this coming through dog catcher, supervisor, mayor. I'm a military veteran. I've been around. I've commanded a lot of different kinds of groups. I hope I can bring a fresh perspective to California because God knows we need it.
We got Republican candidate for California's congressional district number 7, just outside east of Sacramento. Beautiful part of the world, by the way. You got the foothills there, gold country,
Yep.
a lot of history there as well. And this is Buzz Patterson, and you can find him at buzzforcongress.com, buzzforcongress.com. And I'm sure that you guys go on that website, support this man, because this is as you just talked about, this is a very flippable seat. We are in a situation now. You know, I talk with other candidates. I met you at a candidate forum a few months ago. And this is, I mean, obviously we want President Trump to win re-election, unless you're a never Trumper or hardened Democrat, of course. But the House is critical. It's not that less important. And we can see the results why, because we've just spent 2 years dealing with nothing but investigations and impeachment and this vitriol and this derangement. I mean, Buzz, I don't understand, and I've been following politics as long as I can remember. I've never seen people so just carrying so much hate and cancer within them towards a public official. What is going on? What is it about Trump? What is it about these people that they just can't accept the fact of the results of the 2016 election?
I think that Trump shocked them so dramatically that most of America and most of our media thought that Hillary was a shoo-in. I mean, every single poll that came out had Hillary winning in big numbers. Liberals were rejoicing that, first female president, another Clinton in the White House, and Trump came out of nowhere and just shocked them. And they have not accepted that outcome. I mean, they just feel like it was stolen from them. The whole popular vote versus the electoral college argument, they feel like Trump came in and took away their candy. And they have not, Trump, TDS, Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing. I mean, I get it on my social media all the time. I was having lunch today with my wife, and the lady behind me was going off on this tangent, this angry, like, coming out of her shoes tangent about how evil Trump was, and you know what a bad man, and he's corrupt, and and it's just, that's what people cannot accept, the fact. I mean, and liberals get really angry about stuff, and they get really, really angry about Trump. But if they would take a step back again and look at his accomplishments, look at the unemployment rate for blacks, for Asians, for Hispanics, look at the stock market, look at the economy, look at the jobs that are being created, look at the fact that he is negotiating with both North Korea and Iran. He's got China coughing up all kinds of concessions with tariffs. I mean, the guy's everywhere doing all kinds of things. And I think that if Americans could just take a step back, calm down, and take a look at what he's accomplished, we'd be in a much better situation. But they're not. He's going to win in November. It's going to be even worse than my expectations. But I think, you're right. We've got to give the House back to him, Dave. We're going to be facing 4 more years of Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. And it amazes me how much he's accomplished with the headwinds that he's had to fly in through this first 3 years.
You seem like a pretty level-headed person. I remember during the Obama administration, especially at the very beginning, I went to a few Tea Party rallies. I hung out with people of like mind, and we were absolutely disgusted with the idea of Obamacare and some of the things that he was doing with the military. And we were deeply, deeply concerned about his agenda. But I didn't want, I didn't live my life on a day-to-day basis spewing hate and going on relatively young social media at the time and talking the way that the left talks. What is this divide that we have in this country where we simply just can't even have conversations with some of these people anymore? And how do we fix it?
That's the $1 question. I'll tell you, when President Obama was elected the first time, I feared for his policies, but I actually was applauding the fact that we had our first African-American president. I was not.
Yeah.
I didn't hate the guy. I didn't like his policies, but I didn't hate the man. And I can guarantee you I didn't go on social media and go crazy. And I think social media has done a lot. It's had a lot to do with this. I mean, on both sides. I mean, I'm on there. I'm on the right. I understand that people get heated on both sides, but I think social media has further divided the country. In my adult life, I can never remember a time that we were this divided. This divisive, this emotional, this angry. this profane. It's just something totally new. And I think it goes back to the fact that Democrats feel like they got cheated in 2016, and they're going to get beat again. So it's only going to get worse.
Well, if you're watching the Democrats debates, and, there's a joke that we have up at Whiskey Politics, and it says, the Republicans have enacted Operation Let Them Speak. It's like, just let the Democrats speak, and all the Republicans need to do is sit back and win. We've got Bloomberg now, and he was in the debate, and it was an absolutely abysmal performance for him. He started to come back a little bit towards the end, but no way, did it meet the level of what people's expectations were, especially for $400 or $500 million that he's invested in getting people's attention. But when I take a look at somebody, and I think about it from this standpoint, when I take a look at somebody like Bloomberg, who is acting like an oligarch at this point, he wants to buy the presidency. He has zero personality. And you're watching him at the debate, and you're thinking to yourself, this guy's going to spend over $2 billion on trying to buy this race or support whoever is going to try and beat Trump. You are running for Congress. You see the homeless crisis in the blue cities in California and across the country. Why wouldn't somebody like a Bloomberg take $2 billion, he won't miss it, and try and invest it in the local communities? Try to actually do something for the good instead of trying to buy himself some form of, as ingratiating or satisfying his ego, because that's what I see this is right now.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, it's narcissism, and it's, I saw it with President Clinton. I saw it with Hillary Clinton. It's just narcissism and ego. The fact that this guy has that kind of money to throw around, in an attempt to, he's an oligarch, exactly right, in an attempt to buy the presidency. And watching the debate last night, Dave, I don't know about you, I thought it was highly entertaining, watching them all go after each other. I mean, they were eating their own. Klobuchar going after Mayor Pete, and everybody going after Bloomberg, and Bloomberg didn't have any answers. I mean, I don't know what he's doing for his debate prep, but he wasn't very good. I thought he got destroyed last night. And you know what? The Democrats are in trouble because it's looking like it's going to be Bernie Sanders. So we're going to have a capitalist versus a communist in November. So that ought to be a lot of fun to watch too.
Yeah, and you and I briefly discussed this. I want to see Bernie Sanders because I want that stark of a divide in this country, right? Because Bloomberg's kind of like, well, he was kind of he is a capitalist. He was kind of a Republican before he was an independent, before he was and so you may get a little bit more moderate people that hate Trump that might just, throw it to a Bloomberg. So from a strategic standpoint, a political strategist standpoint, I would prefer to have Bernie. But then there's a side of me that is worried about that, because I think to myself, we're a relatively very split country, 49-51, 50-50, whatever it may be. And you get somebody like a Bernie Sanders, and then it's only February, and you've got coronavirus, you've got the economy that could be impacted around the world that could eventually catch up with the United States. You could have anything that could happen, a black swan event, if you will, like you did in 2008 with the financial crisis. And a lot of people suggest that that is what pushed Obama into the win column, was the financial crisis. If it's Bernie that is the candidate, now you've got a communist socialist running the United States of America. That scares me.
I don't think that's ever going to happen. And I think you would see a massive number of Democrats, especially business owners, that would not support Bernie. And that's what scares the hell out of Democrats, is they're going to get stuck with Bernie. That's why you're seeing this suppression right now in some of the big, like CNN's not even talking about Bernie. They don't want him because they're trying to drive Elizabeth Warren or Biden across the finish line. I want to see that dichotomy. I want to see a capitalism versus communism debate. And I think you're going to see that this country is not built for socialism. It never will be. It never was intended to be. And I don't think all the millennials in the world who feel the burn for Bernie are not going to be enough to push him into the White House. And I just think all they'll be doing is re-electing President Trump. And I support that. I kind of like that idea. But you're right. I mean, I don't think they have any. I don't think they have any solid candidates. I would say this: as badly as he performed last night, in my opinion, in February, Bloomberg is the only guy that can defeat Trump. He's the only man, and I think Trump knows that. I don't think it'll happen, but I think Trump feels very comfortable with it being Sanders or Warren or Biden or Buttigieg or Klobuchar, any of those guys, Trump is going to destroy. But with Bloomberg's money, he can hang around as long as he wants to hang around, and make some inroads. And it might come down to that.
Well, if the election were held today, I think all the legitimate polls, and, you know, again, legitimate polls, not the NBC poll that Biden was referring to, are showing that President Trump, in fact, the best poll there is right now is the betting services overseas.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been seeing this.
Yeah.
You know, you got Ladbrokes and a couple of the other ones right now. All of the Democrats are underwater. They're like anywhere from 2 to 20 to 30 to 1 odds. The only, you know, and they're basically paying you to bet on Trump. In other words, you know, you got to, they think Trump is a shoo-in at this point. But again, it's February or March, and anything can happen in the next several months. But let's go back to the House for a little bit, because I know that this is your bailiwick and this is what you're focused on. You're trying to turn your seat. And there were 31 districts. We've talked about this several times on this show, that voted for President Trump in 2016, that voted for a Democrat congressperson in 2018. And you've got Brad Pascal, who is eyeballing at least a dozen of them that he thinks are definitely flipping back. He needs 18. But what do you see from your, I don't know if you're doing any internal polling or speaking with advisors, but what are you seeing for the landscape right now for the House?
Yeah, well, I've got a great team, by the way. I'm just really very blessed and very fortunate to have the team I have around us. I see there being 6 in California. We got our clock cleaned out here in 2018, especially in Orange County. Yeah. And I can see 6 to 8 that we can possibly flip in California. Mine being one of probably the most possible. With you know, D plus 3 in California, as you know, Dave, is about as good as it gets.
Yeah,
for a Republican. So I think we got a real good shot. I think we can flip 6 in California. We're going to need a lot more help, obviously, across the nation. But I think people understand, and I think President Trump understands directly now, that he focused on keeping the Senate in 2018. We lost it. We lost the House. And now he realizes for the next 4 more years, he has to have that House back. And I think he's going to put a lot of emphasis, a lot of money, a lot of time into making sure people like me get elected. I sure hope he does, and I think he's going to be out in California a lot campaigning for us. And because, you know, if you take away San Francisco and Los Angeles and parts of Sacramento, this is a red state. I mean, yes. The coasts are blue. The rest of the state is red. I mean, that's why we have on the eastern border, we have Nunez and McClintock and Kevin McCarthy. So, I mean, there's the farmers and the ranchers get it, right? My lower half of my district is farmers and ranchers. So they support Trump overwhelmingly. So I think we've got a real good shot out here. Across the nation, it's going to be interesting to see how people vote in those close toss-up House races that their incumbent supported the impeachment, like mine did. My incumbent, Ami Bera, promised not to support or not to vote for the impeachment unless it was bipartisan. It obviously was not bipartisan, and he voted for it anyway. So there's a lot of those kind of people that people are going to say, hey, you know, the impeachment was a mess. It was a bad idea. My girl supported it, and I don't support that. And I've had a lot of Democrats in District 7 tell me the exact same thing.
California, going back to our earlier part of our discussion, is experiencing significant problems, a tectonic shift. And this is not an earthquake in California. It's the economy, it's homelessness. You're seeing former great cities, world-class cities like San Francisco that are inarguably one of the most beautiful places on earth to visit. You've got medical conventions pulling out because they just don't want people walking amongst the needles and the defecation. From your perspective in Congress, because I know it's a local issue, but from a congressman in California, what could be done to stem this tide of just the ruination of California?
Well, it's a ruination that has been prompted and supported by Democratic leadership, quote unquote leadership, over the last 30 or 40, ever since President Reagan left office as the governor out here. It's been going downhill. And I think you're exactly right. Beautiful cities like San Francisco have become just almost fourth world countries. You know, for example, in California, you can't get a plastic straw, but you can get a free hypodermic needle to shoot up your crack, your coke, you know, whatever. I mean, it's amazing to me. Like my wife was pointing out yesterday, you can't buy a plastic straw, but if you go to the local Ralph's or Rayleigh's, Everything's wrapped in plastic. You get plastic bags. I mean, it's the whole thing. So the whole straw thing is just, that's a straw man is what it is, actually. I think we need a change in California. And I think the Democrats have proven they can't run the state. They want to get into the ground. It's time for some fresh air, a new approach. I think there are some things federally that we can do, Dave, in California, for example, with the homelessness. I think President Trump's already indicated to Gavin Newsom that if he doesn't get on it, then Trump's going to take care of it. So there are things we can be doing involving the National Guard. There are a lot of things we could be doing that we might have to do if the Democrats in California can't figure it out.
You know, I'm a big proponent of 10th Amendment, right? And I want the federal government out of our pockets and our bedroom. And I think local control is better. But what happens when local control essentially just spirals downward, you know, into, you know, this mess that we see? You see it in Los Angeles. You see it in Sacramento as well, parts of it too. So, you know, I see somebody like Donald Trump. He's coming in and he's saying, hey, look, you know, I'm going to have my Justice Department basically prevent you guys from being reimbursed for all these different things if you mandate sanctuary cities. Right. You know, we see people that are being murdered by illegal aliens that have been deported and come back and deported and come back and deported. I mean, you know, Kate Steinle, for example, this guy apparently is going to go free. You know, he was deported 5 different times. So is there a level, and I guess I'm looking for a comfort on this regarding the federalization of these issues when they really should be state issues?
I agree with you completely. I'm a big states' rights guy, but I'm also a big guy on results. And I think that states should have the right to take care, localities, municipalities should have the right to take care of their own problems. But when you repeatedly fail, and you start breaking federal laws, for example, with the sanctuary cities, that's illegal in California. It is unconstitutional. And I think Trump and the DOJ are going to look at that. And that's where you get into the withholding of federal funds. And so we can't have an impact on that. Again, I'm a big proponent of states' rights, but when the state's failing, and as goes California, goes the rest of the nation, in my estimation. We have the 5th largest economy, Dave, in the world in California. And our public schools are number 48. That's a crime. That's a tragedy. That just goes to show you we don't have anybody in charge, anybody that's got any good ideas, and we're continuing to go down the path of forcing everybody out of California, and we don't want to do that. I mean, again, it's a great place. I've flown all over the world, 69 countries and 6 continents. This is the best piece of real estate I've ever seen. It's a beautiful, beautiful state, and it's being mishandled, and it's a crime. I wouldn't go downtown San Francisco right now. I drove down to LA to the Skid Row area 2 months ago. And I've been to places like Sudan, Somalia. My God, downtown LA and Skid Row is it's horrific. The cops don't want to go in there anymore. There's hepatitis breakouts. I mean, and people are talking about possible bubonic plague. You know, we've got to get some help out here and get stuff cleaned up.
There are experts, Buzz, that have learned everything there is to know about third world slums in Brazil and Southeast Asia. And they say parts of San Francisco and Los Angeles are worse. Yeah.
I've seen the same thing.
That's not hyperbole.
No, I've seen the exact same thing. I mean, I've been into some really slum areas. I won't use the S word, but I've been in some
holes.
Yeah. And you know, always made me glad to come back to the U.S. as an American citizen. I'm telling you, I've been in combat, and I've been in some really rotten places. And I'm telling you, downtown San Francisco and Los Angeles right now is as bad as I've ever seen it, if not worse. It's that bad. I tell people it's not third world; we're fourth world in some places in California now.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's really scary. Last question for you, because I really do appreciate you taking so much time. I know you're busy with the campaign and everything. Congressman Buzz Patterson, you're at the State of the Union next January. You're standing up and applauding a re-elected President Trump. What would be your number one priority? Would you want to put together a bill on a particular issue, and what is that issue?
Yes, this is one of my top 4 priorities, but I want to make it my number 1 priority. Talking about homelessness, Dave, let's talk about homeless vets. You know, as a 20-year veteran, that hurts my heart when I see the homelessness on the streets, number 1, but number 2, knowing a lot of these people, a lot of these guys and girls came home from Iraq and Afghanistan, we send them over there 4, 5, 6 times, and they come back to the States with PTSD. They've lost arms or legs. They've got the trauma of combat over and over and over again. And our VA system has gotten better, but it's not where it needs to be. I mean, if you come back from combat right now, you get a VA kind of a screening briefing, talk about PTSD, talk about what you need. So you get 3 total trips in your first 12 months. That's not enough to treat, because most people who come back from combat deny they have any problems, and the biggest problem is we have 22 vets every single day committing suicide, Dave. 22 vets in this nation commit suicide every single day. That's on us. And I would introduce a bill to do the most we possibly can, not just for the homeless, that too, but for homeless vets who need to be rehabilitated, given the medical care, the mental health care that they need, because we are the best nation on earth with the best military on earth, and we're not taking care of our own guys and girls, and that really, really troubles me. It keeps me awake at night.
Everybody check out buzz4congress.com. That's the number 4congress.com. And also you can find him at Buzz Patterson on Twitter. He's very active. You're on there. Every time I go on, I see something from you. So it's a great feed. And last question. Optimistic?
Yes, I would say right now, of course, March 3rd, everybody, Republicans don't get complacent. March 3rd. In California, super primary across the nation, we got to get top 2, our jungle primary out here. I feel real good about being in the top 2. Hopefully we'll be number 1 on March 3rd, be in the top 2. And I think after that, it's going to be a horse race. And our early polling shows it right now to be a toss-up. So I'm feeling pretty good.
Awesome. It's very exciting. It's a very important year. And the complacency issue, I agree with you 100%. Don't look at the Democrat dais and think, oh, this is a slam dunk and stay home. Everybody needs to vote. Buzz Patterson, thank you so much. Congratulations on an incredible, interesting career. We'll have to have you back on again to talk more and get deeper into some of those books as well. And we'll see what happens after you win the primary in March the 3rd and go on to win in Congress in the general. Thank you so much, Buzz, and greatly appreciate it. And folks, we'll be back again real soon with more fascinating interviews here at Whiskey Politics. Cheers.